on where we have come from, where we are, and where we want to go, and also a short section of what we wish for from the community in terms of contributions towards accessibility, and then a longer slot where Amanda will give us a short introduction on screen readers, on how to use them, and what is important when making concept towards more accessible ILIAS, while also thinking about screen readers and how they work. So let's kick it off with a short slide on where we come from with accessibility. I don't start from the very beginning. There's quite some history in the project in terms of accessibility, but I like to start with the Materna report of 2020, because this report really did show that several sections of ILIAS have a rather large issue when it comes to accessibility, and this also kicked off quite an amount of work that has been done since this report, and also I think really increased the awareness around the whole topic. At least accessibility was then selected as an important topic while presenting the large-scale project for ILIAS 8. So the technical board, as well as also the people presented in the Sure Fix, when I think it was Klaus Borkhoff that presented accessibility as one of the major projects we worked on for ILIAS 8, have been convinced that that should be really the case, that we should put a focus on this topic, that it will be important, and that we need to improve our whole development cycle towards more accessible ILIAS. It was also voted, I think it was the highest in the Beirat, with a even larger section of the community present. So it was voted the most important project there that has been presented, and also got some funding from this group as well. And at least in my awareness, it's ranked still as a very important project among the community. I think we also see today 59 people of the Development Conference are looking right now this presentation. I think this is a rather large group, so the awareness is still high. Still, it is somewhat hard to find people that are willing to work with us in this project, and to find expertise is even more difficult. We have some really knowledgeable and skilled people in the SIG, but we are still a quite small workforce. Therefore, also a special thanks to Christina Auerswald that carries out the role of UI, UX, and accessibility expert in the ILIAS community. Thanks a lot. She's really contributing a lot, mostly behind the scenes. She is sometimes a little hard to convince to give some big speeches, but behind the scenes, she's really doing a lot of the work, writing bug reports, and helping out also in making concepts, and helping us to really develop towards a more accessible ILIAS. So this is kind of a short history, maybe mostly about the last year, a bit more than the last year. And this is where we are today. So there have been some really good and big improvements in ILIAS 7 towards a more accessible ILIAS. Thanks a lot there to Kat that really put a lot of effort into a more accessible main bar and main menu. Also, the skin has improved quite a lot. This is special thanks to Yvonne and Enrico that put a lot of work in there to make a bit better color contrast, and also work with some headings to make them better. Also, I think Database was also involved in this work. Thanks a lot. And a special thanks also Amanda Mace, that is Amanda who is here today, that is working mostly with the University of Bern and the Hochschule Luzern in bi-weekly meetings, where we also always select a few pages in ILIAS to be looked at and to be audited carefully for any issues in terms of accessibility, and those issues are then reported, and we try to fix as many of the issues as we can, and all the fixes then get re-evaluated by Amanda and Redkey, so that we get more and more pages as close to some waycake paths as possible. In this SIG, we mostly discussed upcoming audits. We discuss also the progress on bug fixes, select important issues to be worked on, and also discuss feature requests that have some special importance in terms of accessibility. So there has been quite a lot of work being done. I think the improvements, they are okay, and also WebKey also confirmed those improvements. Amanda typed us a short letter where she acknowledges good progress in terms of accessibility over the last half year. So there have been good improvements, but still, and this is maybe the next slide on where we go. We have some pages now. They're really close or do not have many major issues in terms of waycake 2.1 conformance, but ILIAS is big. ILIAS has a lot of modules. ILIAS has a lot of sections and features to be worked on. So there is still quite a lot of work to do to really get full, maybe also beta file compliance or complete waycake pass. So there's still a lot of work to do, still a lot of hands-on developments that we have to carry out. Also, there will be a next test from Materna, where we again contracted Materna, that's the company from 2020, to do another test in the ILIAS 7. That's in November, and also one in February for ILIAS 8 to see where we stand in terms of BTV progress and how we improved in this test as well. If you would like to know more, maybe also get more details, Christina and me wrote a short blog entry that was published, I think, on Monday. And I think you find some nice little details in there where you can read up on what you have been doing and what we are working on and what the challenges and difficulties are right now. Maybe that's also good. Then step towards the last slide, what we wish for. And I think this is my main speech for today. We really need to include accessibility in the complete development cycle. That means in the concept phases, in the implementation phases, and also in the testing phases. We have published this accessibility cycle that guides us, that we're working with in the SIG, where we always check up on or if we're performing the right steps. But I really think we all as a complete community must keep that in mind, that this is not something that is relevant in some special point in time after the implementation is done and the testing starts. So we do some accessibility testing and maybe find some issues, fix them, and be done with it. It's, I think, somewhat harder than that, because we really need to include this project early on in the complete development. So if we do write a concept, especially if it's with heavy UI cornerstones, then we need to consider those things very early on. So also early feedback is key. We have really good people in the community, Stefan Kuhl, for example, Wolfgang, that really do know a lot about accessibility, that are highly involved also in the SIG, that give regular feedback, but we need somewhat wider feedback on the topic as well. So if you find something, if you have people in your institution that find something or have difficulties with anything, we need to bring that on the table. You can also contact our UI, UX, and accessibility expert, to give a mailing list, or also, of course, directly contact the SIG. And lastly, but maybe most importantly, we do need more people working in the SIG. You are always welcome. You can also start by being a quiet listener. Just listen to what we're talking about in our special interest group, listen to what the topics are, listen to what the people are they're working along with in there. Maybe then after some time also get some work package to get you geared up with towards contributing to a more accessible ILIAS. So that's mostly it. Maybe one last remark, really big thank you also to Amanda and AD WebKey first for being here today. I think you're a big asset, but also for the work you have been performing over the last 6 months. That was a really big help. I think we have some 30 issues that you uncovered, maybe even more, that have been reported, and quite a lot of them are already fixed. So, and I think each issue might be a help for somebody struggling with using ILIAS with a screen reader or whichever tool. So this is a really good improvement and a big help for a lot of people. So now we have only 3 minutes for questions. Of course, you're always welcome to nag with question also outside this conference or in breaks of this conference. So just throw them in. You can also ask them publicly in the forum that we have from the SIG if it's some question of a broader interest. There are also really a lot of good people that may help you. But if there is a question right now, please ask them now. I look in the chat. I see none, and we have 2 minutes left. So I already skipped over to our main event, and that is Screenreaders by Amanda Mace. And Amanda, the stage is yours. Get us started on Screenreaders.
The main event. I don't know that I need that kind of pressure.
The main event, at least, of that slot here. I think most people are kind of here because they want to know from you and on what you have to share with us from Screenreaders, and a little less of me. So, yeah, there we are.
All right. Well, firstly, it has been an absolute pleasure to work with the interest group on accessibility, and I can tell you that we have worked with other LMSs, and the response and the willingness to just make fixes and get it done is actually just incredibly encouraging, and it's an absolute joy. I look forward to my meetings with the team, so I'll start there. Look, today I really just want to do a bit of an introduction to Screenreaders. Screenreaders, they're a specialty item, and to be honest, I've been using them for 10 years as part of what I do, and I still don't use it the way someone who is blind is going to use a screen reader. So no matter what I can cover today, which isn't a lot in half an hour, you're not going to use a screen reader the exact way someone who is blind is, but it is a great introduction to what the challenges could be. If you've ever had to listen to a screen reader in the past, it's quite a jarring experience, and I'm going to give you a bit of that experience today with some demo videos so you can actually listen to a screen reader. And it is quite a different experience to listen to a page rather than to read a page, regardless of what the content is. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about me and who I am. So my official title is actually Vice President of Australasia for AbleDocs. Essentially that means that I'm in charge of the region for Australia, New Zealand, and Asia for the company AbleDocs. AD WebKey is an AbleDocs company, and all we do is accessibility. So regardless of which part of AbleDocs we're talking about as an international company, everything we do is about digital accessibility and making sure that users, regardless of barriers, can access digital content. I've been in the industry myself for about 10 years. So I actually fell into the role with a friend whose parent had started a company on accessibility, and I just took an interest and a liking to it. And honestly, here I am 10 years later. So you never know, you could have accessibility as a future career. I am heavily involved in the W3C. The W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium, and they're the people who make the standards for accessibility and lots of other things. HTML5, W3C makes the standard. CSS3, W3C makes the standard, and a boatload of other standards, accessibility being one of them. Obviously, with my interest in accessibility and my career path, those are the working groups I work in to help create standards and guidelines to make sure that digital content is accessible. So I guess the first thing that I want to do today is kind of define what digital accessibility is, because accessibility is one of those words that can have lots of different definitions. But I want to be really clear that when I'm talking today about digital accessibility, I'm talking about the inclusive practice of ensuring that websites and applications and electronic documents can be easily navigated understood by people of all abilities and disabilities. So I often say when people ask me what I do for a job every day, that essentially I do the digital equivalent of a wheelchair ramp. So if you imagine approaching a restaurant only to find it has no door. So, there are people inside. You can hear the clinking of the cutlery, the smell, the aroma of the food. You can hear the chatter of conversation, but you can't join them. That's how it can feel for people with disabilities when they're interacting with applications or with websites, and organizations aren't prioritizing accessibility. Basically, it's there, but you can't get to it. There's a really famous quote from Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who is one of the inventors of the World Wide Web, and he's actually the W3C director. And he says that the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. And I just really quickly, before we dive into screen readers, talk about the idea of an essential aspect. So oftentimes when I'm talking about how essential the web is, I talk about things like what it was like to grocery shop 20 years ago. If you were a blind person, there are no braille markings. I don't know about where you're living, but I can tell you in Australia, we have no braille markings in our superstores. All right, so you go grocery shopping, you need to buy food. If you were a blind person 20 years ago, you absolutely needed to have someone with you. You could not do it independently. Someone to tell you the difference between flour and sugar. All right, then we actually are only 3 years into having anything tactile on our notes, on our bank notes. So you were trusting someone to tell you the right amount. You would hand over money, not knowing how much you handed over or whether you got the correct change back, because there's nothing tactile on our bank notes to tell you what banknote you had handed over, what banknote you were getting back. So in something essential like food shopping, you lost independence, security, and privacy just for going food shopping. And if we think about it now, 20 years on, the power of the web is that you can do those things online. And with a screen reader, a blind person can hear all of their groceries read out to them. They can securely and independently select the ones that they want and add it to their digital shopping cart. They can securely hear the amount and pay for the amount, select the delivery time, and have it delivered to their front door. So all of a sudden, with the power of the web, you can regain, as a person with a disability, independence, security, and privacy. And I think it's fair to say that those are 3 things that ultimately we all have rights to, regardless of barriers. So I want to point that out in particular because what you're doing every day is providing a tool for education, and education is another right. It's another essential aspect to life, right? And we want to make sure that everyone has access to education. And part of what you do is incredibly important for that. And accessibility plays a role. So with that in mind, what is a screen reader? Well, a screen reader is an interface between the computer's operating system, its applications, and the user. So aside from having a voice synthesizer, which speaks out the content, a lot of screen readers are actually also designed to work with electronic or refreshable braille displays. If you haven't seen one of these, they're very cool, and I highly recommend having a look at them. They usually sit at the bottom of a keyboard, and they you run your finger along them, and as you lift your finger up, it does a new line of braille. So you can read a page. It's fantastic to watch. We have someone on our team who is blind who has, well, basically, she calls it her braille iPad, and she uses it when she gives presentations. So instead of reading notes, she can run on her, well, it's not quite an iPad, but her braille pad, she can run her finger along it and read her notes while she's talking. I think I need to learn to read braille, to be honest. Much better than reading notes. So we have this amazing technology, and look, hopefully I don't have to convince you why it's important, but the statistics are actually quite high. So globally, the number of people with vision impairment sits at about, it's estimated to be about 285 million people. 39 million of those are completely blind. Here in Australia, which I have to admit are the statistics that I focus on in my region, we currently have about 357,000 Australians who are blind or low vision, and they project that number to be more than 500,000 by 2030. So it's actually increasing significantly. A lot of that has to do with the aging population, and that would be true in other countries as well. As we age, we do tend to lose a bit of sight, and low vision becomes more and more prevalent. So screen readers and other assistive technologies like it, Zoom technology, really their purpose is not only to provide another means of accessing technology, but it's about inclusion and about independence. So I want you to go forward with the rest of this presentation thinking about that inclusion and independence. There is a whole list of screen readers. In this session, I'm going to talk about MVDA, and my demo videos are going to be using a screen reader called MVDA. MVDA is a free and very popular screen reader. It's actually currently the most popular. The other one that you hear a lot about is a screen reader called JAWS. JAWS is one of the older screen readers. It is a little bit pricey, but it is still very popular because it's so old. JAWS and MVDA share a lot of the same terminology to describe controls like radio buttons and combo boxes and things like that, and they work in very similar ways. So JAWS and MVDA do take up the majority of the market in terms of screen readers. The difference between JAWS and MVDA, for the most part, is that JAWS is quite expensive, MVDA is free. So hopefully after this session, you might actually, oh, thank you, Christina, for popping that in the chat. You can go have a try and play around with it a little bit. I highly encourage you to do that. So there are lots of ways to interact with a website or a web page or a web application using a screen reader. The first thing that I do when I'm interacting with a website is to interact with the interactive elements. So really, I'm only talking here about buttons, links, input fields, things that you need to actually activate with a mouse typically. And so very much like you would for all of us, and I certainly put my hand up for this, I'm too lazy to use my mouse to click into the next input field. I will literally tab to the next input field because I can't be bothered clicking the mouse. So it's very similar. You tab into the next input field, and it should theoretically go, of course, to all of the links, buttons, and input fields, anything interactive. With a screen reader on, you'll hear all of those things as they are programmatically defined. So you should hear things like the linked image here, and we'll have a go at this in a moment, but you'd hear something like linked graphic, WebKey IT logo. Link, skip to content. And really there's a couple of things that you're looking for. You're looking for, are you getting to all of the interactive elements? Because if you can't get to something, that's problematic because it means it's inaccessible to someone with a screen reader. Are they labeled properly? Is the link reading properly? Is the button reading properly? Does it say what it looks like it should say? And is the focus in a logical order? And by logical, I mean, well, for most languages, left to right, down, left to right. You should be able to predict where your focus is going next. So your keyboard focus is actually really significant because even though the majority of screen reader users are completely blind, there are lots of screen reader users who just have low vision and they want to be able to track where the keyboard focus is. So it's important that you can see where it is and that it's going to the right place. All right, so I'm going to have a go at playing this video and hopefully you guys can hear. I did check the right checkbox, hopefully, so you should be able to hear the video. And we'll just listen really carefully for how the screen reader reads through my demo page. I will sort of preface this with if you've never heard a screen reader before, it can be quite a jarring effect. I've slowed this screen reader, the speech rate, down quite a bit, but it may be a little bit fast, so it might take a little bit of time to adjust for you.
Enter landmark homepage graphic visited link. Main menu navigation landmark list with 3 items. Home visited link. About link. Contact link. List with 2 items. Previous item graphic button. Next item graphic button. List clickable with 4 items. Stop animation button. Item 1 button. Item 2 button. Item 3, current item, button. Item 2 button. Item 1 button. Stop animation button. List with 2 items. Next item graphic button. Previous item graphic button. Banner landmark. Main menu navigation land, about link. Home visited link. Home page graphic visited link.
All right, so you'll see there that I went through the first few links of the page, and then I actually went back. So to when you tab to the next input or the next interactive element, and when you want to tab backwards, it's Shift Tab. And as you could hear there, MVDA actually read out each of those items as it came across them. And that's what you're looking for. Is it correct? Does it make sense? Is it getting to everything? With a screen reader, this is probably the very first thing that I do. There are lots of ways to navigate with a screen reader. The elements list is another way. So the elements list on MVDA is basically a list of defined headings. So headings, links, landmarks, anything that's present on the page that could help with navigation gets pulled into this elements list. A screen reader user can tab through, choose the item they want to navigate to, and then when they select it, the reader brings them straight to the relevant text. So when you're testing this, you're looking for any issues or anomalies. So things like empty headings where the heading tag is still there, but it's empty and there's no content in there, or nonsensical headings, something that's not actually making any sense, or empty links, so on and so forth. The reason the way the elements list works is so important is that if you think about the way you look at a page when you're browsing the internet or using an application, is you don't read every line top to bottom. You have never read every menu item in a mega drop-down menu. You just haven't, unless you were desperately searching for something that you couldn't easily find. You don't read every line. What you do is you find sort of the things that look like headings, and you know what they look like. You know, they're a little bit bigger, they're usually bold. There's a bit of space between them and the paragraph underneath them. You find the heading that you're after, and then you read the content underneath. You don't read every line. Well, for a screen reader user, if they can navigate via headings, what they can do is have those headings read sort of out of situ, brought up out of context, and they can navigate that page going, oh, this is what the page is about, this is what that section is about, and go directly to the section they're after. So this is a really important concept for navigation, and it makes the way that we do headings really important in ILIAS. So where we're structuring headings to be able to get to different sections is actually really important. So I have another demo video. Exactly, absolutely, that's exactly right. This demo video is going to show you what it's like for a screen reader user to pull up an element list and navigate.
Elements list dialog. Tree view. Skip to content 2 of 21 level 0. Type, grouping. Links radio button checked Alt plus K. Headings radio button checked Alt plus H. Tree view. What is urban planning? Expanded 1 of 1 level 0. Level 1 video transcript 1 of 6. What's involved in urban planning? Main landmark. What's involved in urban planning? Urban planners work with the cognate fields of architecture, landscape architecture, civil.
All right, I'm going to stop it there because we actually don't need to hear all of this. This is a demo website, so the information's not even necessarily correct. But the idea is there. As you can see, I was able to select a heading and go directly to that section underneath the heading, which meant I didn't have to listen to all of the content over and over again. And especially if you get 3 or 4 pages into a journey, you don't want to listen to everything all over again. You just want to get to where you're going. Now, there are lots of other ways to navigate I will not go through them all, but the one I will mention because I think it's important is there's something in MVDA, and in fact, JAWS has this as well, and it's called ReadAll. ReadAll basically starts from where your current position is and just reads the rest of the page all the way down, everything, which means if you have something that's like hidden by the CSS, but still programmatically there, guess what? The screen reader reads it. It gets to it. So just because it's not visually there doesn't mean it's not programmatically there. And those are little bits and pieces that when you test with the screen reader are really advantageous. It's going to open up a whole world of, oh, that didn't sound right. Something's happening there. And that's a good thing. It's a great way to find bugs. I actually highly recommend using ReadAll to find a bug because it typically, if there's something wrong, you'll find it with a screen reader. Now, form fields are another way that screen readers are just incredibly helpful to find things that haven't been quite done. So typically, or hopefully, you'd have a visual label like email address as a label for a text field. But it also needs to be marked up correctly with an HTML label. And the reason that is that when people are interacting using just a keyboard, they can do exactly like you do, which is tab to the next input field. So they don't have, obviously, someone who's using a screen reader isn't likely to use a mouse. So they're going to tab. And rather than reading every line, they'll just tab to the next input field and put in the requested information. That information in the HTML label it should match what the visual label says. Let's start there. But it needs to be there. And if it's not there, it actually reads edit blank, meaning it's an input field, you can edit it, but it's not telling you the purpose. Whereas if it had a purpose, it'll say something like name, edit blank, meaning you need to input your name here. Edit blank means that it's currently blank and you can edit this field. From a coding point of view, and just because I can't help to mention a little bit of code, the very best practice for form control is it should have a label associated with it using label for and ID. If we're doing labels really well, they work perfectly. Best practice is always going to be your friend in this scenario. And to be fair, for accessibility, it's always going to be your friend. Best practice HTML. So let's have a
name edit required invalid entry. Blank. Please fill out this field. Company edit. Blank. Email edit required invalid entry. Blank. Please fill out this field. Phone edit. Blank. Enter your message edit required invalid entry multi-line. Blank.
So one of the things that you'll notice with this particular form, this read pretty well, which means it's been coded correctly. And again, this is where screen reader testing can be really helpful. Just having a quick listen to your form will tell you if you forgot to put a label in, or if something's not appropriately, or if the labels become orphaned because it won't quite read the way it should. You will have noticed on that last screen, potentially, that there were required fields, and when you moved on, the outline became red, but there was no error message. Now, errors need to be read out by the screen reader. So unlike that demo example that I just showed you, you can't rely on just color because someone who is blind cannot see the color change. And in fact, we know, for example, that 1 in 10 men globally are colorblind and have some form of color blindness. It's about 1 in 200 women who have color blindness. That's because it's a recessive gene. Here's your medical update for the week. It's a recessive gene, so it typically goes from the mother through to her son from her father. So it is much more common in men than it is in women. But the truth is, if we have 63 people in this room, the chances are there's someone in this room, in fact, probably several people in this room who have some form of color blindness. All right. So the statistics are actually quite high, particularly for men around color blindness, which means we actually have to pay attention to color. And when we're using color for information on its own, it can cause a real problem, obviously, for people who have things like color blindness, but in particular for a screen reader user, because they can't perceive the color because they can't see it. So error messages are really important, and having those read out actually make a very big difference. There's lots of ways to code this, and in fact, I guess I should point out that one of the advantages and disadvantages at the same time of the standard of the Web Content Accessibility guidelines is that it doesn't always, in fact, most times doesn't tell you that you can't do it this way. It'll tell you you have to provide an alternative. So there may be 100 ways to make an accessible experience. At the end of the day, you're looking for a great experience, which is why testing with a screen reader is so important. I mentioned earlier the ReadAll mode, and I'm just going to touch on it really quickly again. When we do ReadAll, you're really looking to make sure that you've heard everything. So everything on that page should be read. It should be read with structure. You should hear all of the headings. You should hear where there's an input field. You should hear where there's a toggle. You should hear where there's something that should be expanded or a drop down. All of those should make perfect sense. All right. This is a great way, again, to find little bugs in the code. So really, in ReadAll mode, you're asking, did I hear everything? And does it make sense? You might find that screen readers work differently with different web browsers. Surprise, surprise, the user agents aren't all over it. Narrator, which is the Windows operating system one, it works best with Microsoft Edge, unsurprisingly. It is a Microsoft product. So Microsoft is promising that the next version of Edge is going to be more accessible. Let's hope it is. It's terrible now, but hopefully it will get better. MVDA was actually it was built to work with Firefox, but now it works just as well with Chrome, to be perfectly honest. And JAWS, its best experience is in Internet Explorer, which is sad. And I know that they're working on this. It does work pretty well in Chrome, given that there is no longer any support for Internet Explorer. That's pretty important. The general consensus around blind users that I know is that they prefer MVDA when it comes to browsing online, and JAWS is much better for documents. They have a bit more legroom, which is fine too. Why is there so much variance in the way screen readers interact with browsers? Honestly, nothing that you wouldn't be familiar with. You know, sometimes just the communication between the DOM and the screen reader is direct, and some of the browsers have one or more accessibility trees or APIs that communicate with the screen reader. So the browser should tell the screen reader that the link is underlined and colored purple is a visited link, and the screen reader should convey that to the reader. How well a browser actually communicates with a screen reader really, it depends on how the website is developed and coded. So if it's properly coded, most browsers will tell the screen reader what the objects and the elements are and what they do. It doesn't matter if a visited link is presented in any other way other than purple and underline. If the coding specifies that the element is a link and it indicates whether that link was previously visited by a user or not, that should convey through the screen reader. Often though, unfortunately, websites aren't well coded, and that goes for web applications as well. Sometimes we have things like headings that are made to look visually like headings on the screen, but they're not coded as headings, which means you can't navigate by them. So this means that basically with the screen reader, it won't say that it's a heading. So not only can you not navigate using those heading commands that I showed you before, but also the context of the content on the screen can be lost really quickly. If links aren't coded correctly, you might not be able to navigate to them or even activate them. At worst, a screen reader user might not even know that there's a link there. That's happened before too. I'm obviously not going to go into coding. We don't have time, and you're probably all much better coders than I am. But hopefully it gives you a bit of an insight as to why websites work with some browsers and some screen readers and why some don't. I do want to do a bit of a comparison just between MVDA and JAWS. So MVDA is a very good alternative to JAWS. You will hear people in the blind community who are still very wedded to using JAWS, and that's because it's been around for a long time. So it's built this great reputation as being the best screen reader. To be fair, JAWS does have some additional features like skim reading a document by the first line or sentence or paragraphs, but JAWS can be clunky. I've had to resort to, switching between JAWS and MVDA at times, which is unfortunate. I know that they're working on making it less clunky, but as it is right now, honestly, it just is what it is. After the session, if you're really inspired by what I've talked about, I would encourage you to have a go maybe on your mobile. There are screen readers on your mobile. If you do that though, can I just warn you to make sure you do the tutorial that is offered on your phone for the screen reader first. Do not have a go at it without doing the tutorial. It will scare you. It takes over your phone and your phone will work in a different way. Your hand gestures will be different, and yeah. Worst case scenario, if you're using an iPhone, ask Siri to turn off VoiceOver and it will. But I highly recommend having a go and just giving it a try. I won't touch too much on this because we only have 2 minutes left and I know we're on a tight schedule, but there are lots of guidelines. The current guideline is WCAG 2.1. It is the most recent release. It is what the EU Web Directive is pointing to. So this is a requirement for all UA states. And the EU is also pushing this from an e-publication point of view as well. So this is that Web Directive is going to expand, not get smaller. The newest release, which will include another 9 additional criteria, is expected to be released early next year. So there are some things coming up that are worthwhile keeping an eye on. So just to close really quickly, I guess what I really want to say is that it's not about disability, it's about accessibility. If we keep in mind that people don't have disabilities, everybody just has a different set of capabilities and abilities, and we disable them when we put obstacles in their path. And really, hopefully, I'm hoping to encourage you to start removing those obstacles. That's it for me. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Great presentation. Thanks to Amanda. We still have some, let's say, 2-3 minutes for questions. Take the chance now. We go on here at the 10:15, but if there are some questions, please use the chat now. Timon, anything from your side?
No, just thank you very much. I really did already learn a whole lot from you, Amanda, and I'm looking forward to expand that also over the next months. And I say I invite you all to learn with us, also join the SIG. And if there are any questions like popping up in the next days or weeks or even months, the forum on the SIG group is always a good point of first contact, or just type a mail directly to me or my colleague, and the expert group is Christina.
Yeah, okay. So thanks again, Amanda. No question means you made a very good presentation, so no questions left. That's it.
Making it very easy on me. Thank you so much for having me and for putting me first. I realize that this is an awkward time to have an accessibility talk, but I appreciate it, and at least my kids appreciate it because they'll get dinner on time now.
Yeah, and we had quite a lot of people there in the chat. So it's more than 60. We have usually at the DevConf we have about altogether in 2 tracks. Both tracks we have between 80 and 100, and especially in the morning. So it's was well visited, so great. Yeah, and I think we keep in touch at least as you work together with Timon and the SIG. So it's I hope it's not the last time that we saw you and that you got a presentation from your side.
Absolutely not. Anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And then we switch to German.